It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to have everybody back for another day. Got a lot of good stuff coming up on today's show. Chris Hine covers the Wolves for the Star Tribune. Will join me here in a little bit. Interesting point in that team's season. They play New Orleans tonight. They've got Memphis coming up in a couple days, then a couple against Sacramento after that. So they're kind of done with some of these easier teams, which have not been easy on the Wolves, as Chris and I will talk about at the jump of our segment. Wolves are 4-6 this year against the four worst teams in the NBA, and that is just unacceptable. If you're looking for one kind of signifier of where this season has gone awry, gone not according to plan with the Wolves, a game under 500 at this point, that is a big one. So Chris and I will get into that in addition to a lot of other things about Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, and the trade deadline. Got some Aaron Rodgers thoughts here in a few minutes. Got some Twins takes at the end of the show. First, though, what did I miss? Start with the Wild today. Third loss in a row. Played well Tuesday against Tampa Bay. Probably deserved maybe a better outcome than a 4-2 loss. Tampa Bay scores the go-ahead goal in the third period and gets an empty net goal towards the end of the game to seal things. The bigger takeaway from the game, aside from Wild playing better despite its third consecutive loss, though, is that penalties continue to be a problem for this team. Wild took 5 minor penalties against Tampa Bay in this game, so gave up 5 power play opportunities. The Lightning got 1 on the power play, including, I believe, that was the tying goal late in the second period, if I'm not mistaken, that got them even in that game before things went to the break, and then they came back out and got that third one to go ahead in the third period. Wild is third most penalty minutes in the entire NHL this season. That's not something you want to be leading in. That's not an area where you want to say, "Hey, we're right up there. We've got ourselves primed in that position." 565 penalty minutes this season. Only Montreal and Florida with more. Within that, the penalty kill has been okay, 79.1%. That's pretty much middle of the pack, and they do have 8 shorthanded goals. I believe that's second now in the NHL behind Philadelphia, which has 9, and the Wild did get another one of those on Tuesday. Joel Eriksson-Ek, first goal of the game, was a shorthanded goal. So when they are shorthanded, they've fared okay, but you do not want, obviously, to give a lot of teams, especially very good teams like Tampa Bay, that many opportunities with the man advantage, and it came back to bite them in this game because, like I said, the tying goal did come on a power play. So just tightening up the bad mistakes, the mistakes the Wild are making, especially with penalties, and a culprit in this game, and maybe a little bit some lately, was Ryan Hartman, forward for the Wild. He had 2 of their 5 minor penalties in this game, and one of those came with about 5 minutes left in the game, with the Wild trying to push to tie the game. Took a bite out of their momentum. Took 2 minutes off the clock where they couldn't really try to push for a goal. And the go-ahead goal in the third period banked in off of Ryan Hartman. Again, maybe just a little bit of bad luck, but he was in a pretty down mood after the game. Watching the post-game, reporters asking him kind of about some of the penalties and some of the things that maybe are weighing on him. Here is what Hartman had to say about that to reporters in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, obviously don't letting my team down. Feel responsible for some things that have gone on, so obviously it's not a good feeling.
Now here's why you got to love hockey, or what makes hockey unique. That sentiment was relayed to Wild coach Dean Evason after the game, and here is what Dean Evason said about what Ryan Hartman said and Hartman's proclivity to take penalties lately.
He should be hard on himself. It's stupid. Absolutely stupid.
So there you have it. Maybe Hartman's the next in line to get a seat in the press box instead of on the ice. We'll see about that. Matt Dumba was back for this game, by the way, after getting some healthy scratches lately. Dumba a -2 in this game, by the way. I don't think that was all his fault. I think the Wild, like I said, by and large played a pretty good game, maybe deserved a better outcome. But again, when you give a team like Tampa Bay that many opportunities, sometimes that's going to happen. You're not going to get the outcome you think you deserve because you're just giving up too many chances, giving too much away to offset all the good things you are doing when you are 5-on-5. So that was the story of that game. That's been the story of the last few games. We'll see how the lineup dynamics change or don't change. We'll see how the Wild fares now that they're kind of off this tough road stretch. Tampa Bay 18-4-1 at home. So there you go. That's tough, right? You're not going to win all those games. I think the Wild can at least take some positives out of this one. I'll talk to Sarah McClellan more about that on Thursday's show. Planning to talk to her for Thursday's show, by the way, to get a little bit more in depth on the Wild. Let's switch to Aaron Rodgers really quick. Now, I don't want to give this too much time right now. I just had a thought because he goes on the Pat McAfee show every week, even in the off season right now, and that's fine if he wants to. But I've got some Rodgers fatigue. Even though I'm interested in this, obviously what he's going to do, what happens with the Green Bay quarterback situation is interesting and relevant, obviously, to people that are listening to this podcast. A lot of you are Vikings fans. Some of you are Packers fans. Whoever you root for, if you are rooting for one of those two teams, this is a pretty big story. What struck me is this. He's trying to decide what he's going to do next year. He's talking about how he's open to reworking his deal, which obviously he's got a cap number of almost 60. He's got a cap number of 31 million, but he's got like 59 million guaranteed in salary in 2023. Obviously, there's not a lot of things that can be done in terms of a trade or whatnot. But he said he has to decide where he wants to play, and whether that's for the Packers, whether that might be for another team. Just reading from the ESPN.com story by Rob Domofsky. And this is what Rodgers told Pat McAfee. He said, all the other ideas about a trade and whatnot, that's all conjecture until I decide what I want to do moving forward for myself. And later he said, if a trade happens or if he stays with the Packers, whatever he says, I'm not saying that to be cryptic. I've got to figure out what I want to do, and then we'll see where all the parties are at and what kind of transpires after that. Here's an idea, Aaron, and this is fine. He can take his time. He needs to go through his offseason process. I think that's fair. The season has only been over for a few weeks, over for some, longer than others. The Packers did not make the playoffs this season, in case you did not notice. 8-9 this year. He did not play anywhere near the MVP level that he played in 2020 or 2021, which might go towards this decision, as does Jordan Love sitting there. But as he goes through this process, trying to decide, do I want to play at all? Where do I want to play? Here's an idea. Just don't talk about it. We don't need to hear about it. I don't need to talk about it right now. If you're not talking about it right now, I'm not talking about it right now. Do you just want the attention? What is it that makes him keep talking through the process publicly instead of just going somewhere, decompressing, and then reemerging like a groundhog seeing his shadow as soon as he knows what he wants to do? We don't need to hear every thought process along the way. I know he probably just wants attention. I get it. That's kind of how he is wired. But my advice to him would be just go away for a while until you know what to do, and then reemerge once you know what you want to do, Aaron.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Let's welcome back Chris Hine onto Daily Delivery. Chris, of course, covers the Timberwolves, your favorite subject on this podcast and mine. Chris, every time I think maybe the Wolves have started to take this season seriously, they do something like lose to the Rockets, losers of 13 straight before that game in Houston on Monday night. I got to say, Chris, I don't know, a team that's what you think you wrote 4-6 now against the four worst teams in the league. Sure seems like it has a problem taking things seriously enough in these occasions. How do they explain just kind of the dynamic of playing down to the competition?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I basically posed that exact question to a few players last night. And they didn't try to deny it. They said, yeah, we let up when we see the Rockets on the schedule. Like, it's just a natural human inclination. So they didn't try to sugarcoat that fact. The first step in correcting a problem is identifying you have one, right? But the thing is, you don't get to play the Rockets again this year. You don't get to play the Pistons again this year. And, you only have a couple matchups left against some of these bottom teams in the league. So this opportunity to really bank some wins against some of the lower teams in the league has vanished in a sense. And they did not take advantage of this portion of their schedule. 4-6 against those teams. It's, you want that to be like 8-2, not 4-6.
Yeah.
So, at the end of the season, when they're looking back on playoff positioning and seeding, you can circle back to, some of the games against better teams that they should have won. But I'm going to circle back to these games and be like, this is where this team, could have been a seed or two higher if they had just taken care of business, even on half of these remaining games. 7-3 even in these 10 games would be a market improvement. So nobody to blame but themselves. This is kind of who they are as a team, who we know them to be over the last season or two here, and it's one of their biggest points of immaturity that they have.
Do you think that, it's never one thing usually with any explanation to a complex problem, and certainly not with this team, but is there a player, is there a system, is there something that we can kind of start where we say it's, is it Ant still not being a fully mature player? Are they taking their pulse from D'Lo? Is it other things? Is it just the fact that they've had a lot of players out and they can't afford to coast in games like this? Is it Finch? I'm just trying to. Do they think they know, aside from they're not focused enough, where that lack of focus is coming from?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Ant. I wouldn't put this on Ant necessarily, because Ant has, I think, been really, really good over the last few weeks, especially with Karl being out.
Yeah,
has
I would agree.
basically helped keep them afloat. So I wouldn't put this on Ant. Especially because considering on Saturday night when everybody else came out flat, he was the only one that had that kind of energy and basically saved them in Saturday's game. I just think it's got to be everybody. It's the supporting cast, like Naz Reid last night, 9 minutes of playing time. Didn't see the floor that much. They needed more from him. Kyle Anderson, who's been, one of their best players all season, gets in foul trouble and only plays like 10 or 11 minutes or something like that. I didn't think Jaden McDaniels had his best game, even though he has played better of late. So it was just kind of a collective thing last night that just up and down the roster, the supporting cast, Jalen Noel, coming off the bench, did not have one of his better games, and he had been playing better of late. So just one of those nights where even people who had been playing well, just everybody just collectively just stunk it up. And you're going to have those nights, but you still need to find a way to beat the Rockets. They got kind of lucky in their previous two meetings. I think back to they played the Rockets 3 times this month, and the first game, if you remember, a couple weeks ago, they were down by 20 before they came back and won. And then Saturday, they were down double digits in the second half before Ant goes on a tear and saves them. And then last night, it all came back to bite them. So we'll see. New Orleans, one of the better teams in the Western Conference this year, on tap for Wednesday night. And I fully expect the Wolves to be ready for that, because that is kind of who they are. I think they will probably come out and play a good game against New Orleans. They did last time. So they're maddening in that way. And that's just who they are.
I would agree with that, and we can maybe getting bigger picture here. Rudy Gobert resumed play. He'd missed 3 games. I'm thinking 3 or 4 with the
3.
groin injury, and but he was back against Houston. And I'm not pinning this one on him, because I thought he had for what we've seen of Gobert this season. That was, I think you would take what he gave you in that game. He had like 15 and 4 blocks, something like that. I thought he was pretty good in stretches, at least the individual numbers. But I do still sense, and again, it's been clunky because he's been in, he's been out. There hasn't been Towns. They've been missing players at various points. Still feels a little clunky when he's on the court offensively. Doesn't feel like there's the same flow or whatever you want to call it. How did you feel like his first game back in the lineup went, both from a team standpoint and from a Rudy Gobert standpoint?
Yeah, I thought individually, I thought he was fine. As you pointed, the box score looked really good. I do think that there is something to just getting used to playing with him, getting readjusted to playing with him. Defensively, they play differently when he's out there most of the time. They're more in the drop coverage as opposed to kind of getting up in their high wall hedging kind of defense. They've been doing a lot of switching recently as well. So I think there might be something to just getting reacclimated to him, but this is kind of the rhythm of the season. It had seemed like before he got hurt that they were getting better. He had some of his best games, and I think they had some really good performances, right before Rudy got hurt. I'm thinking back to that. I think it was the Portland game, which was maybe a game before he got hurt when he played really well. And then he gave it a go in 2 other games and had to leave 2 straight games because of the injury. So, you can't really count those when you factor this in. But I think this is just an ongoing process. That injury has just interrupted, getting used to playing with him. He had an ankle injury for a little while there. We don't know what it's going to look like when Karl eventually returns. So there's just a lot of the injuries have just kind of interrupted this process, right? Of integrating Rudy Gobert into what they do. Because one of the observations I have on this season is, and I've written about this a time or two before, Rudy, like the team needs to really perform well around Rudy in order to maximize what Rudy does well.
Yes.
Like the team needs to be playing on a string defensively to maximize his potential as a rim protector and shot deterrer. If they're not, teams are still going to get open looks, especially from, let's say 3-point range or whatnot, where Rudy feels like he has to cover maybe, like 2 places at once or try to be in 2 places at once. On offense, it's about integrating him into the flow, the screen and roll games, the lobs, the pocket passes. Where's the ball going to be coming from when he gets the ball? And like I said, I do think that they were making pretty significant progress before this groin injury sidelined him. So how do they get back to that? Where do they go back to it? And then bigger picture, weeks from now when Karl comes back, how does that all look again? So it's just a very incomplete picture when you try to examine the impact of Rudy Gobert on this team and this team on Gobert.
I like that observation. I think I said something similar to that on Twitter during the game Tuesday night or Monday night when I think it was a back and forth I was having with Aaron Rupar, big Wolves fan, where I said I liken Gobert in some ways, even different sport, but he's kind of like Kirk Cousins. The things we say about Kirk Cousins as a quarterback, where it's like if things go really well, he's really good. Like he can be a piece of something that's going really well, but if something kind of goes off script, that's not really Rudy Gobert's game. That's a scrambling kind of game or something like that. That's not really his game, similar to Cousins. And again, 2 different players, 2 different styles of what they bring, but that's something definitely to watch as the year goes on. And he could be, maybe that's kind of the upside they see in him, is that if they build a deep playoff run caliber team around him, he can be a foundational piece of that. But until they get to that point, it is going to look a little bit, maybe not just even a little bit, it's going to look a lot ragged at times because that's not his game. I'm glad you brought up Cat because you wrote about him a little bit. I think it must have been late last week because he kind of gave some expanded thoughts on his injury while he was doing a Twitch stream. What do we think about the diagnosis that he was discussing of this being more of a grade 3 calf strain, which would suggest that maybe it is going to be, post All-Star break perhaps until we see him again. And what does that mean for this season?
Yeah, so it was the first time Karl had really expanded publicly in any kind of public forum about his thoughts about the injury and kind of detailing what was going on since the injury happened. In journalism school, they don't tell you that, you have to be monitoring people's Twitch feeds when they're playing video games with their friends for significant news tidbits to drop.
No, they do not. No.
That's not something I learned back in college, 15 years ago. But this is how it happens these days, with social media and all the various platforms that professional athletes are on. Sometimes it's a Twitch stream that generates news. So he detailed that it was a grade 3 calf strain, which is kind of on the more severe end of it. The various websites and things you see could be anywhere from 2 months plus, 8 to 12 weeks, whatever. He seemed to take issue with a reported 4 to 6 week time frame, and I think it's important to note, and I noted it in the piece, the team never said 4 to 6 weeks. Nobody from the team has come out publicly to say 4 to 6 weeks. In the news release of the team from the team, it said indefinitely and out several weeks. Chris Finch, when he's been asked about this multiple times over the last couple of months, has always said it's no timetable or it's no. He never put a definitive timestamp on it in any of his public statements about it. So Karl, I think, took issue with that, reported from ESPN. We reported 4 to 6 weeks as a potential timeline while cautioning that it was not definite. And we used the indefinitely in several weeks language as well. But I think people saw that in an ESPN story and in a headline to their article about it and kind of just grabbed onto it, and I think that's what happens because people seeing 4 to 6 weeks is easier to remember and grasp onto than just saying he's going to be out indefinitely. So he seemed to be perturbed that 4 to 6 weeks had passed and people are asking him, well, where are you? Are you, what's going on here? What's the deal? Are you not back yet? Do you not want to play? All these questions start happening because we're now into week 8 of this. So I think he seemed to take issue with just the frustration around that. When, people have ascribed that to him and he seems to think it came from the team or however, seems like there's a lot of miscommunication and confusion there. But bottom line is it was a more severe injury than that time frame let on. And it doesn't seem like, at least, I don't have any definitive information on this, but it seems safe to say the All-Star break is probably like, you're looking at that as, where are you at by that point in time?
Like a more realistic timetable of when it would be possible for a return. And, in between now and then, maybe we can kind of finish up with this. I mean, between now and then is the trade deadline. Trade deadline's a little more than 2 weeks away. That's a fascinating animal because you've got D'Angelo Russell, who's been the subject of trade rumors for off and on for a while now. He's got that expiring $30 million salary slot. This is a team that probably isn't really able to do a lot of damage in free agency. So are they thinking about how do you manage that? D'Lo's been playing really well lately, especially offensively. Like he's been one of their best players, probably since the beginning of December or so when he started shooting really well. So any subtraction there, you've got to wonder about what the addition does in the short term. Where do you, again, it's so complicated because they just got Gobert back. Towns probably won't be back anytime very soon, probably certainly not before the trade deadline. How do you think they approach it with kind of the season they're having, the goals they have, and some of these pieces that are dangling out there as possible trade fodder?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions, and I hope to be speaking with Tim Connolly about some of these in the next couple of weeks here. I think, the overarching question to me is how much are you trying to win right now? As it relates to D'Angelo, as it relates to maybe dealing Naz Reid, who's on in the last year of his deal. And there's been some, rumors out there associated with him. How much are you trying to push the chips in, or how many chips are you pushing into the center of the table for this season? You know, I think that affects how you maybe look at a D'Angelo Russell, especially in light of you don't know when Karl's coming back and what you're going to be getting from him. So do you keep D'Lo because he is having such a great year, shooting wise, offensively? Do you keep Naz Reid because you need another center? And Gobert has been banged up as well, and Naz Reid has been starting, I think, much more than they have anticipated this season. Do you have enough center depth with Nate Knight and Luka Garza that you could still afford to part with Naz Reid? There's a lot of questions that I don't know the definitive answers to them. I was thinking back to the other day to the monster trade deadline a few years ago, when Gerson Rosas basically remade the entire team.
Went back when they got D'Lo, right?
The day they got D'Lo. And I was just thinking about like that trade day, and one of the deals, in that trade deadline was the 4-team trade where they sent out Robert Covington to Houston, and as part of that deal, they got back Malik Beasley and Juancho Hernangomez, who were
in Denver
at the time, and Jared Vanderbilt. And those guys were, at least Hernangomez and Beasley, were under Tim Connolly at the time, and were in the last years of their deal where the team had no plans on re-signing them. So Connolly pulled the trigger on that trade to, take advantage of, young players who the team wasn't going to sign long-term, but they were going to get something for them anyway. So I was just thinking back to that and how that's maybe a little like what they're dealing with a player like Naz Reid, good player in the rotation, right? But future past this season, especially with Towns and Gobert here, a little murky. Do you cash in that asset for something else? Do you trade Naz Reid for backcourt depth, and then does that allow you to trade Russell potentially? I don't know. But I was thinking back to that trade and just the philosophy that Tim Connolly had in that trade of getting rid of but dealing young players, getting something for them when they were not a part of your long-term plans. And that year, that was the bubble year, that was the pandemic year. I mean, Denver made it to the Western Conference Finals, so it was not like they were really sacrificing too much of their what they were doing in the moment. So just something to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make, because you're right. Thinking about how Connolly has operated in the past, and I always go back to, and I did kind of a montage of his introductory news conference quotes the other day on the show, and one of the things that he said at that introductory news conference was that I think it's something like success isn't always linear, and I've thought of that quote a few times this year, where I just kind of wondered if we can think whatever we want about the Gobert trade right now, and it doesn't look great. But if he went into this season prepared to kind of go through some stuff, understanding that this roster is incomplete and that there was, a lot of moves still to be made to get it where he wants it to be where he thinks it can ultimately be competitive. And is this trade deadline part of it? I don't know, but it could be. And right now, it does seem like their roster has still some imbalances that could be corrected at the deadline. None of that's going to happen before they play the Pelicans. They have Memphis coming up pretty soon too, right? That's their schedule gets tougher, does it not?
The schedule does get tougher. Yeah, Sacramento comes to Minnesota for 2 games, and Sacramento is playing really well this year. I remember when NBA Twitter was united in saying the Kings made a terrible trade last year. And now look what's going on,
Yes.
Sacramento is one of the surprise stories of this season. So, go figure.
Go figure. You never know in the association. We'll see how the Wolves do the rest of the way. We'll probably talk to you soon, maybe around the trade deadline again, Chris Hine. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you later, Mike.
Good stuff from Chris. As always, he'll have you covered in New Orleans. Kind of a big stretch coming up for him, for the Wolves, like we talked about at the end with New Orleans, Memphis, 2 against Sacramento. I mean, those are all teams that they are chasing in the West, all teams that are above them in the standings. Wolves have tended to play up to competition this season, but how many wins can they realistically expect to get out of that stretch of games? We will find out soon. Let's finish quickly with the cooler. I wrote about this on Tuesday on StarTribune.com. My thought of just the Twins in transformation, just how much they are remaking themselves right now. And this has been a process over the last couple of years, but it's really striking me right now with some of their recent deals, trading Luis Arraez, a batting champion, for more pitching help, including Pablo Lopez, trading for Michael A. Taylor the other day, a Gold Glove caliber center fielder, signing Christian Vasquez at the start of this offseason, some of the moves they made last year as well, re-signing Carlos Correa, who, excellent all-around player, but a defensive, very good defensive player as well. Twins in 2019 became affectionately known as the Bomba Squad when they hit 307 home runs, set a major league record for home runs in a season. Right now, they do not even closely resemble the Bomba Squad. They are being rebuilt around pitching and defense. All of these trades they've made in the last couple of years to remake their starting rotation, trading for Jorge Lopez last year to bolster the bullpen, signing different players to help, signing or trading for players to help the defense. This is a team that will, by and large, succeed or fail on the merits of their pitching and defense far more than their offense this season, I think. I think the pitching and defense is becoming the strength of this team, not the offense. And we'll see if that bears itself out. We'll see if they're good, bad, otherwise in these areas in this coming season. But I feel like they are remaking themselves intentionally in this mold, far away from the Bomba Squad of 2019. That'll do it for today. Like I said, Sarah McClellan covers the Wild for the Star Tribune, will be on with me on Thursday. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for listening. I'm Michael Rand, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.